So welcome to today's session. We're going to be talking today about burnout, and I think burnout is something that many people.
Dr. Michelle, can I just
Yes.
put a pause here? We would like to introduce myself as well as my founder.
So sorry.
And your
My first
introduction
time.
is
It's
also
my
very
first
much
time. I'm
important.
so sorry.
No problem. So, hello everyone. Good evening. And this is Dr. Mayuri Dutt from India. And we are here to have a wonderful session with Dr. Michael Lawrence all the way from South Africa. This particular webinar is being arranged and organized by Vidya Dan Foundation, a non-profit organization which empowers underprivileged children, youth, and women through education. Vidya Dan Foundation is committed to provide quality education in India and helping disadvantaged children to realize their full potential, to inspire the young generation to work for the development of rural students. To raise awareness among broad audience, Vidya Dan organized more than 3,000 webinars during pandemic, and thus the journey of online session, which seems more reachable, continued. Hence, connecting with educators from all across the country and bringing them on this platform to deliver talk on unexplored topics in society, which will make people's lives better and proactive enough to become great citizens of the country. Various sessions by Vidya Dan had been conducted. We had sessions on LEP, which is session on legal education program. We had walk to talk with teachers, principals talk show, NTSC session for aspirants, building on inclusive future through LGBTQ and allyship. Katha Se Pathan, that's a very innovative way of method of teaching, which is story integrated. Building an inclusive future. The future is also very interesting. This is the first time we've seen Vidyadan Foundation doing such programs. Menstrual health hygiene campaigning concerning the issues of edulcorant disposal in Kasaragod. Then we had International Yoga Days, which was celebrated, and read me a story and slogan writing competitions for various competitions which were conducted online by Vidyadan Foundation. Then the time came when we thought about having something unique, and we invited Dr. Ali Khwaja, who's a well-known counselor, life skill coach, columnist, and a writer. We just made sure that he comes and deliver his talk to the students. It was wonderful and it was very interesting. But that talk was actually for the ones who are above PG level. So this time we decided upon having something for the students who have really suffered during the pandemic. And we made sure to invite the most famous, wonderful person all the way from South Africa, Dr. Michelle Lawrence, who is a psychologist. She's a counseling psychologist and a co-owner of Psychic Online Tutors, which is Shirley's Development and Training Solution. She owns a counseling practice and is also trained mediator and facilitator for high conflict relationships from a personal perspective. She lives in Cape Town, South Africa, close to the sea, and loves taking long walks on the beach with three beautiful dogs. Ma'am, what a coincidence. This is Dr. Maidi Dutt. I too love dogs, and I also have three beautiful Dalmatians in my house, and I love them. But we are very unfortunate that we don't have such a beautiful sea beach near the house so that I can walk with them on the beach. So that's what a coincidence. Today we are going to talk about burnout. Well, I know our audience are not much aware of this subject. Many of us know someone who has had to take a break from work due to burnout. But what exactly is this set of symptoms and what's the difference between burnout, normal exertion, and depression? The term burnout was coined in 1970s by the American psychologist Herbert. He used to describe the consequence of severe stress and high ideals in helping professions, doctors, and nurses. For examples, who sacrifice themselves for others would often end up being burned out, exhausted, listless, and unable to cope. Nowadays, the term is not only used for these helping professionals or for the dark side of self sacrifice, it can affect anyone from stressed out, career driven people and celebrities to overworked employers and as well as the homemakers. Surprisingly, experts don't always agree on what burnout actually is. This has consequences because it's not exactly clear what is burnout and how it can be diagnosed. It's also not possible to say how common it is. In today's session, we bring you a presentation and demonstration followed by Q&A sessions by Dr. Michelle Lawrence herself. And here, ma'am, we have with us wonderful kids who have joined us from all across the country, that is India. We are there from students from Bihar, there are students from West Bengal, there are students from Delhi, there are students from Haryana, there are students from Maharashtra as well as Andhra Pradesh. So these students will be there. And in addition to these students, we have a biggest platform known as YouTube. So there are thousands of school children, teachers, parents, as well as homemakers and all who have joined in today's session. And everyone is looking forward to get something from you. I know the time is limited, but then I know that you are an expert and will definitely use the time and show the world, the audience today, what exactly is burnout and how we can overcome that. Thank you, ma'am. The stage is all
Thank you.
yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, so my name is Michelle, and as I was introduced, if you look at the continent of Africa, I am at the very low part. There's a dot right at the end or at the base of Africa, and that's where I come from. And we're very fortunate here. A lot of people think that we've got lions as pets and giraffes roaming in our garden. And it's not far from the truth in the sense that I've got a lot of wooden giraffes and a lot of wooden, I've got a big wooden elephant, but that's only because I love animals. We don't have that in Cape Town. Cape Town is a beautiful city. I'd encourage you to come and visit it. We have like lots of beautiful things in Cape Town. You must stay for at least 2 weeks. You'll never be bored. What's fun fact about me? Yes, I do. I have a psych online tutors, which I tutor honors students in psychology and get them ready to become psychologists. But one of the things about my practice that you might not know is that it is a must love dogs practice. So in my practice, if you don't like dogs, I have to refer you. So this was my little dog yesterday. He was in the practice while I was doing therapy, and he sat on my chair. I had to go sit on the couch because he wanted to sit on my chair, and he fell fast asleep. His name's Cody, and he is the most amazing animal in therapy, because a lot of people who are stressed, he'll come and sit next to them and he'll put his head on their shoulder or put his head on their lap. Sometimes there's been a time where he was playing on the balcony. I have a little balcony here, and then he heard somebody crying and he ran up to them and he gave them a lick on the cheek just to let them know that they're okay. So having dogs in therapy is very important for me, because sometimes they communicate to me how other people are feeling because they're so perceptive. So so that's who I am. As mentioned, I love, one of the things that you will see later on, I'll talk to you about ways that you can prevent burnout. And I always take me time to go and walk on our beach. I'm very lucky. Our beach is like 2 minutes away, and go walk on the beach with the dogs. Cody loves jumping into the waves, and he just brings a lot of laughter and joy into my life. And so it's beautiful to watch him, and that also de-stresses me. and helps me to breathe again, because sometimes listening to people's problems can be quite stressful in and of itself, for those of you wanting to become psychologists one day. So this burnout, what is burnout? It sounds like such a hectic word. And I think what is so confusing about burnout is that burnout looks different in different people, depending on how people cope. Sometimes burnout looks like you are overachieving, and you don't see the evidence of it until you land up in hospital. Other times, burnout looks like people wanting to cry a lot, feeling so exhausted you can't motivate yourself. Procrastination sometimes looks like burnout. So it's hard to pinpoint, what is this burnout? How do I know that I'm suffering from burnout? Because sometimes we are already burnt out before we realize we were getting there. So I'm going to be explaining to you a little bit, firstly, about how do we identify whether we are heading for burnout or not? How does this even happen? How do we become burnt out? So how does that even happen? And second of all, what are some of the things I can do to cope with burnout? Like, what if I am feeling burnt out? How can I stop being burnt out? And then third of all, I'm going to teach you some techniques, especially when you're feeling anxious and overwhelmed. I mean, you can, like we were saying um, earlier, about the impact of the pandemic and being in lockdown and having to go back to school, and everybody's traumatized from all the people, the losses that they've had in their lives. And loss doesn't have to just look like death. Loss can be losing your parents, losing their jobs, maybe having to lose friendships because you were away from friends for so long, losing your freedom. Now you suddenly have to be so scared of getting this dreaded disease, and then it's morphing into this and that, and you never know if you're safe or if you're okay, if everything's okay and you can proceed. So your whole reality starts to change. And so we have this internal stress that is going on that we don't even realize is there, because we just get used to living like that, and it becomes what we call the norm. So I'm going to teach you some techniques that you can use to be able to cope with that and to debrief it. So when I say debrief, it's like, how can I get rid of this so that I don't become so overwhelmed? Because not everybody can afford to go to a psychologist and go talk about their problems. Not everybody has the time or the money or the energy even to be able to get there and go and talk to somebody. So this is a way that you can even help to empower each other. Sometimes your peers are your best point of reference. When you're feeling down, they can say, you know what, I think that you might be heading for burnout. Maybe we need to find some ways that I can teach. I've learned this on this platform that I was on, and maybe I can teach you some skills that you can learn to cope with what you're going through. Okay, so we let's start from the beginning to identify what is burnout. So when we look at what burnout is, we think of you guys that are in school still, and don't ever think that just because you're in school you don't suffer from burnout. Or just think about it. You've got tests, you've got exams, you've got the work at school, you've got to interact socially with your peers. Peers have got problems, you're trying to be there to help your friend. And every little bit of these things starts to contribute psychologically. It creates a lot of stress inside of you. And what happens is you just imagine this is your cup, and your cup is supposed to be full, okay? But every time you're giving from the cup to work, to your parents, to your friends, to everything that you're giving, your cup is getting emptier and emptier and emptier. But nobody's doing anything to fill the cup up. And so what happens is the stress that's involved in that keeps making you pour out your cup doesn't get replenished. And so the stress versus the management of the stress are not matched. Okay, so stress is in itself is not bad. I mean, think about it. If you're anxious before you start writing your exam, one of the plus things about it is that you can. Sorry, can you just mute at the back, please? Got sounds coming through. One of the plus things about becoming anxious or feeling stressed is that you start studying. So, that is a good motivator. So stress in it of itself is not bad, but managing your stress when it becomes too much and your resources to cope with it are too little. So there's this imbalance. And then that's when we start to get burnout. Because imagine, the best way I can explain it is, imagine every day we get 100% battery life in ourselves. Okay. So we get, here we are, here's 100%. Now we can only use 100% of our battery life. But imagine as we're giving out, the battery life is going lower and lower. Now imagine by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, our battery life is already flickering, going, we're on low, we're on low. She said, okay, no problem. I'm going to borrow from tomorrow's battery life. So you bring tomorrow's battery life in and you plug it in, and okay, now you've got it. But eventually you are borrowing from a month down the line and you're wondering, why am I so exhausted all the time? Why am I not feeling? Because you're not managing your battery life every night, every day. So you can only use the battery life that's in you. You can't keep borrowing and thinking that nothing's going to happen to you. And sometimes when you're young, it takes longer to get there. When you're my age, you feel it a lot quicker. But it also happens that, I've got a daughter that's 30 years old, and she's like, Mom, I can't do things like I used to in my 20s. I'm exhausted all the time. And she's in the business world, and she's doing a lot of things. My other daughter's also a psychologist, and she says as well, I get exhausted so quickly these days. So don't think you have to wait until you get to my age. You wait, it happens quicker than you realize. So it's important when you're this age that you already start to learn techniques to help you to manage everything more effectively. Okay, so what does it feel like? Well, exhaustion is a very big red flag. And I'm not talking about when you've watched Netflix for too late and then you're tired the next day. I'm talking about constant exhaustion, where you feel like you're dragging yourself through life. Like you can't get up in the morning. You sit down and you just feel it depleted. Like you look at the work and it's like swimming in front of you. You can't keep a sentence in your head. You feel like you read the same thing 20 times and you're like, why can't I keep this work in my head? Because your body is exhausted. Okay. And when that happens, sometimes you get very negative, like, so your mood goes down because your battery's down, your energy's down. And I don't know about you, but when I'm like that, I get snappy, like I'll be like, people will ask things of me and I'm like, I can't do that now. All right. And then they're like, oh, what's going on with you? So you're like, it's not like me to be like that. But when you're coming at me and I've got no energy and my battery's flat, then I do go, yes, stop now, just stop. I can't do that. So that might mean that you start to act uncharacteristically for yourself. Like people are like, wow, you're a bit in a bad mood today, or oh, you're a bit snappy today. And maybe if you like that more often than not, it's a sign that you're getting tired and your energy is down and you're heading for burnout. So you got to keep in mind the red flags, because what happens is we feel guilty when we feel like that. Okay, so we're like, oh, we shouldn't be feeling like that. We should be out there conquering the world and showing our parents we can achieve these amazing results and competing with our friends and things like that. And then we feel guilty and almost shame that we're feeling so tired. And that's not helpful. What needs to happen is we need to be realistic about what we can and can't do, and be okay to say, you know what? I need a bit of time out. I need to pour into my cup, so that when I give from my cup, I give from an overflow, not from a place of feeling that I've got nothing to give. Okay, and then another thing is that you feel like you're not effective anymore. So like you're working so hard, but you're getting nowhere. I don't know if any of you have ever felt like that, where you're just working and working and working, and you just feel like I'm just not achieving my goals anymore. So that's another way of knowing that you're heading for burnout. So I've got this little mind map, which I thought was quite nice. And this is by Andrea Michelle, who actually drew this mind map up. And as was earlier mentioned, Herbert was the person who conquered, who brought this phase, coined the phase burnout. And so, sorry, I have to wear glasses for this part. So when we think of burnout, we need to think of it like a scale. So when the demands of your work outweigh the resources that you're able to cope. So it's too much. Your resources are too little, so it goes up, and the demands are too much, so it goes like that. So when you are like that, then you can see over a long period of time, and sometimes that period you don't even realize how quickly that period comes. Then you can see that burnout is likely to happen. I remember what happened to me just in lockdown. Because I have this online psychology tutoring business, when lockdown happened, everybody was worried about them losing their job. So they went on a 5-week holiday. But in my case, my students were nearly going through the roof with anxiety. And we were busy bumper to bumper, like back to back. We were busy, like working long days to try and help the students to deal with their constant anxiety that was coming our way. And I didn't realize that I was burnt out until I actually was like snapping at my family. And my daughter actually turned around and said to me one day, "Mom, do you realize that you're actually not very nice to be around these days?" And I actually took great offense to it, because I was working so hard and I was trying so hard. And I thought to myself, let me just take a time out and actually think about what's going on. And it was the first time I realized that I'm actually so burnt out, because I'm a person that we call it a red preference person. So a person who's just goal orientated all the time, that I didn't check in with myself. And I'm a psychologist. I should be doing this all the time. So that just shows you how difficult it is sometimes to understand that you maybe are at a point where you are feeling like you need to take a break. So I did take a break. I moved out of my home for a bit, and I went into a very quiet apartment that we own. I was lucky enough to do that, and it made a big difference just being on my own and taking regular breaks. And I could still work, but I didn't have to deal with people. I didn't have to cope with the pressures of cooking for people and things like that. I could just be in my own space, and it made such a big difference. So you need to find what works for you if you start to feel that way. Everybody has their little place where they feel safe, and you need to find that place where you feel safe. So often burnout gets misdiagnosed as depression. So depression, you'll see it's like a loss. Some of the symptoms would be a loss of motivation, emotional, feeling like exhausted all the time, wanting to sleep all the time, or not being able to sleep. So lying awake at night, blinking and counting sheep, or whatever it is that you do when you're trying to fall asleep. Being very cynical, like negative and irritated and that sort of thing, and a lot of tiredness. So when you look at these symptoms, and you look at the symptoms when you diagnose with depression, they overlap quite a lot. So people will often say, it sounds like you're depressed. Here you are, have an antidepressant. That's not the way to go. That's not going to help you. Or they just want to shove anti-anxiety pills down your throat. There's a time and place for medication, but there's also a time and place to realize what is the cause of these symptoms. What's happening within me that this is going on? And so I need to tap into that too, because medication on its own is not always the answer. So we have to say stress doesn't cause burnout. Remember, I said there is healthy stress, but it's stress and inadequate support resources that cause burnout. And so when you look at when you say the workplace can be school as well. Burnout can cause, shame this person can't spell ambition, can cause, can destroy ambition, can destroy idealism, which is not a bad thing, because sometimes when we're idealizing things like getting like that are unrealistic, that's also not good. But can also give you a sense of not feeling good enough. And when we feel not good enough, that's when we feel shame and feeling guilty that we're feeling not good enough and things like that. So burnout won't look what we expect. Burnout will say, I'm bad at this. You're not good enough. You are a failure. And I don't even care if I like it or not. You know, that you can get like almost like rebellious in a way. And it can cause people to abandon their studies and rather, decide, no, I can't cope with that or whatever. So when you're making decisions about your career, it's maybe a good idea not to do it when you're feeling burnt out. Okay, so these are some of the symptoms of depression, of burnout. We did touch on a lot of these already, but closed-mindedness, when you start to become very, it's my way or the highway, don't talk to me. I know this already, okay? I know this. You don't have to tell me, like that kind of attitude. Less of effectiveness at work. I see how many youth come to me and go, Michelle, please, can you help me with procrastination? I can't seem to get into my studies. Every time I'm trying, I'm just not getting anywhere. Chronic fatigue and exhaustion, insomnia when you can't fall asleep, forgetfulness and not being able to concentrate or focus, feeling irritated, quick to anger, maybe frustrated, getting sick a lot. I mean, how many of you feel like, geez, like I just got over one illness and now I'm getting sick again? It's just getting ridiculous. And that's because your immune system is down. It's they're trying to fight, but they're like fighting with one arm tied behind their back. All your immune system is fighting with one arm tied because it's so exhausted. Probably needs some good vitamins and some good food that is going to help to replenish them and make them stronger again. Symptoms of depression can also come about. And also what I'm finding here in South Africa, I don't know if it's happening over in your schools over there, but people are suffering from eating disorders. So either bulimia or anorexia. They are suffering from what we call obsessive compulsive disorder. So become very OCD, obsessed about rituals or certain things that they've got to do. So the thing has got to be clean. So I'm imagining from the pandemic, from COVID, washing your hands all the time, wiping counters and all of those sorts of things. So now those symptoms come out and they become obsessed. One client that my daughter is seeing, it's quite hectic. She ends up sleeping at her desk in her room with her head on because she doesn't want to get into the bed because the bed may be dirty or she hasn't managed to clean it or hasn't managed to shower or something, and ends up nobody's allowed in the kitchen because she has to just have a ritual about how she has to make food. If a dog just walks past, then she has to start again. Her parents aren't allowed to make food in the house. They sit on a gas canister outside and they make food outside. It gets quite ridiculous how to the extremes that this can go. And she has at the same time is suffering from an eating disorder. So every time they maybe put some boundaries in place, then she stops eating. And right now she's already under 40 kilograms. So it's getting serious. So these are some of the things that people are suffering from as well. Suicidal ideation, that seems to be something that's really a lot in with our youth children. with our young people, teenagers. Suicidal ideation is about thoughts of suicide, trying to attempt to commit suicide, and even people who have actually committed suicide. Self-harming, where people start to cut themselves. And a lot of it is this: I don't feel good enough. I'm a failure. I'm not succeeding in life. Why am I here? All of these sorts of things that go on inside of them. So maybe some of you know of people, maybe you yourself feel like that sometimes. And so this space is to say that there is no shame in how you're feeling, or there should be no shame in other people going through that. We need to be compassionate towards other people, to be able to, and towards ourselves, because we need to understand we're taking strain at the moment, and we need to try and find ways to cope with that. Okay, and then some of the causes, when you have to study and the studies just go on, and the projects and the things you've got to do and the extramurals, it just doesn't seem to stop. It just comes in waves and waves and waves. Maybe you don't get enough sleep. Maybe you have poor appetite. So your eating habits aren't good. You're eating junk food or takeaways. Maybe it's not very nutritional. Also, your family demands or family stress. Maybe families are fighting. Maybe there's financial pressure. Maybe there's alcohol, drugs abuse. There's many different types of conflict that can happen in the family. Maybe you don't get a chance to exercise, because that's also a good way of just being able to get release and get good endorphins. We call them endorphins. They are neurotransmitters that make you feel better about yourself. Also, some poor time management. I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it. And then on the day it's supposed to be in, now you're rushing and trying to put a project together. And then also unrealistic goals. So maybe your parents say, I want you to get straight A's. And maybe it's not realistic. Maybe, I don't know, maths, you're struggling to get an A in or something. And now, I can't tell you how many students I've had sitting in my chair crying and crying and crying because they can't get maths they cannot ace maths. I'm like, do you realize maths is, unless you're going to become a doctor, I don't know how this is worth your mental health. Your mental health is taking a lot of strain here over a maths mark, but it happens. So we've got to think about, what are our goals realistic? Are we able to actually achieve the goals that we have? I can see I'm going to have 100 parents and teachers come down on me now and say, now everyone wants to give up maths. What are you doing? Don't come back. So I'm not saying give up maths. I'm just saying be realistic about your goals. And then some of the psychological reasons for burnout, poor boundaries. How many of us want to say, no, I can't come, or I can't do that. I don't have the energy. And then they're like, oh, please, won't you come? And you're like, oh, all right, I'll come. And then you end up going, and then you're like 5 minutes in or 10 minutes in, you're like, I actually don't want to be here. Or you say yes, but you actually want to say no. And then every time you say no, and then they come at you and they, oh, but you're so horrible. Why do you want to say no all the time? You never say yes to me. You said yes to that girl, but not this girl. And then you say, okay. And then you move your boundaries. So poor boundaries. Fear of conflict. You don't want to fight with the people. You want to make everyone happy. Maybe feeling not good enough, constantly pushing yourself to achieve unrealistic expectations. Maybe even financial fears. Like maybe not being able, like I need to get a good job, so one day I can help my mom and dad one day, or I can pay for my studies, things like that. Sometimes also low self-esteem and low self-worth, not feeling good about the person that you are, and so you end up making decisions from that point of from wanting to make everyone happy. Being addicted to work, like every time you're not working. My youngest daughter was like that. I used to ground her from studying. When it came to exams, she would just want to study everything. Say, okay, Chelsea, you need to go out this weekend. She's like, Mom, no one goes out during exams. So then you've got to go find something to do, go walk on the beach, go surf or do something, but you are not allowed to study, because that's all she would do. And she would take herself so seriously that she would actually end up burning herself out. And she's 30 now, I still got to do it today. I've got to tell her it's time for you to fill your cup up. You have to have balance in life. You can't just work all the time and not fill your cup up. So that's a constant struggle. I think she gets it from me, unfortunately. And then guilt and shame from childhood. Maybe you always felt like you were the one that had to make the family look good, or maybe your parents had dreams and they didn't achieve them, and now it's up to you to achieve them. I don't know. There could be a lot of stuff from childhood that could have come in, and it forms these schemas, these things that you look through, glasses. Imagine they're glasses that you view your life through. So unfulfilled dreams of my parents, now those are the glasses that I wear, and now constantly I'm running my life today trying to make them proud so that they don't have to feel like their goals weren't met. So we need to look at those schemas. We got to look at those, we call them narratives, the stories that we tell ourselves. And maybe one day I'll come back and do a whole series about the stories we tell ourselves and where those come from, because that's actually quite an important one as well. And then also other causes could be like due to the COVID pandemic, young people had to work from home. And now that they're back at school, they become overwhelmed with the social interactions and the work demands and having to deal with the teacher face to face and things like that. So those are some of the things that may also be. And I'm sure you can think of some more that may cause burnout. Those are not the only ones, but I'm sure you guys can think you in the world. So, in your world, you'll have other, I'm in South Africa, you're all over the different parts of the world, and each part of the world brings different challenges. So yeah, you might know of other things. So let's look at it from the iceberg principle. Or some of you saw the Titanic, or maybe I'm giving my age away here and you don't even know what the Titanic is. So if you haven't seen it already, go watch the Titanic. It's a long movie, but it explains to you the iceberg, what the iceberg is. And the iceberg is, in this case, it's talking about in the iceberg, we only see this part of the iceberg. Okay, we don't see not me. Okay, there we go. We don't see what's underneath the iceberg. This is what's actually not showing, but this is the part that's showing. So we think, oh no, that's nothing, and we can just go around it. But then that's what happened with the Titanic. It scraped underneath what was underneath, and it ended up tearing a big hole in the engine, which caused the whole Titanic to sink. So if we think about what does this look like in terms of this one is about anxiety, but it's a good thing for you to make one of these for yourself. Like, what are some of the things that I'm showing on the top? Like for me, it was I was exhausted, I became irritated, prickly. I became prickly, irritated. I became when I wasn't working, I just wanted to withdraw into myself. I think my performance was I was trying to keep it up at a standard, but it was costing me a lot emotionally to try and keep it there. So you've got to think of what are the things that you show on the top, that is here on the top of the iceberg. And then I want you to think about what is underneath the iceberg. Okay, so maybe it could be an event that happened. Maybe it's excessive worry about not getting into university or into a career that you want to do one day, or maybe it's about a fear of embarrassing your parents, and maybe bringing shame to the family if you don't do well, a fear of failing at your module, your subjects. So we've got to think about it in terms of that. This is a better one also. So we can have, this is also about anxiety. Okay, so if we look at anxiety, it manifests as battles to sleep, avoidance, being on edge, over planning, defiance, anger, loss of focus, negativity. So that's what we're showing to the world. But underneath the iceberg, there is all of these other things: a fear of failure, sadness, embarrassment, rejection, confusion, loneliness, grief. Now, remember, grief isn't just about people dying, but it's also about other losses that you might have experienced, like I mentioned earlier. Maybe not feeling loved. Yeah, just a lot of other things. So you must do this exercise for yourself and try and think about what are the feelings that are lying underneath the iceberg, and try and identify that, because that's what we don't show enough attention to. We always think about, oh, ooh, look at you, so angry, or oh, look at you, like so negative all the time. But you don't think of, why am I negative? Why am I feeling like that? And that's the why is lying underneath here, the cause of the problem. Okay. So what does that even mean, Michelle? Well, okay, if I've identified it, what must I do? Oh, hang on, I'm going to tell you now. Okay, so we also like need to know when to say no. Okay, and saying no is hard. I'm sure some of you might have tried to say no to somebody and then they get upset with you for saying no. But sometimes we don't even know how to say no. Maybe our parents have never taught us that it's okay to say no. Like, nope, you must be a nice girl or a nice boy. You mustn't be horrible to people. Just always do what they say. So there's a difference between being polite and going, I'm exhausted, I have to say no. I need to have some time to also recharge my batteries. So it's also about how you say no. I mean, if you just say, no, I'm not doing it, that's also not great. Okay. Being in a toxic environment. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm quite a empathic person. So I pick up other people's emotions. And when I'm in a toxic environment, I get affected myself. I'm not even maybe participating in it. I'm just observing it. Like, I have couples that come here and they start fighting. By the time they leave me, I'm exhausted. I just want to not talk to anybody for 10 minutes. I want to sit in my office and just be in a bubble and just decompress, because it was just the whole time. Also prioritizing others above yourself, always being there. Oh, I must always help, I must be a nice person. It's always going to go and do that. That also can cause people to be burnt out. We call it compassion fatigue. Okay, where you are burnt out because you are so compassionate towards other people. And that's where this idea of people pleasing comes in. Also, the superhero syndrome. No, don't worry, I'll do it. Oh, yeah, I'm exhausted. No, I'm exhausted, but don't worry, I'll do it. I'll help. I can do that. Can you take on this other thing? Yes, no, give it to me. And eventually feel like, when you've got a donkey walking dejected like this, and there's this big load on their back. That's how they're carrying this big load. That's how that you start to feel, because you can't say no. You can't say, I can't do it all, and that's okay. So that's where the unrealistic expectations come in. And then also having little control over what you're doing and not being appreciated for what you do. How many times do you so love and you help your friend or help somebody, and then they don't even say thank you, or they don't tell you like, wow, I'm so glad that you're in my life. I don't know what I'd do without you. So yeah, not being appreciated. Okay, so some of the impact. Now, this is quite hectic. Okay. Some of the things like the strokes and heart attacks and this can happen in adults. So you must be aware of that. I'm not saying it cannot happen in children, but it's more than likely going to happen in adults and not so much in children. But children play out in different ways. So anxiety is something that happens, and you start to feel like you're just not interested in things like you were before. Like, I used to love walking on the beach, but I don't even feel like walking on the beach anymore. And I told you about the suicidal ideation, but then physical health happens. Your blood pressure goes up. You can be at risk for things like strokes and heart attacks. You start to get headaches or migraines. You know, those migraines which you can't even open your eyes because the light is hurting your eyes. In extreme cases, prolonged stress can cause cancer or stomach complaints. You get ulcers, for instance. Sleeping disorders, where you can't fall asleep. I can't tell you how many people I come into my practice because they're on sleeping tablets and they can't get off them. And they become addicted to sleeping tablets to try and get them to sleep. If you can, try never to go onto sleeping tablets. It's not good. There's so many other natural remedies that you can do before you start taking sleeping tablets. Alcohol and substance abuse. How many times they go, oh, geez, I just need a glass of wine or something. And then before you know it, you're drinking the whole bottle every night. So eating disorders can also be an indication of that, what can happen, because you want to control the environment. So you start to control your eating, and then that's one way that you can gain control over things. I mentioned self-harming and even an addiction to prescription medication, because some people, I had one client this week say, but my medication is prescribed by the doctor. Well, I've had a friend of mine's mother die from the amount of prescribed medication she was given. I saw a podcast the other day, not a podcast, a YouTube video, where the doctor was saying that he's got patients that come in and they are teenagers and they are on 10 types of medication, 10 different types: antidepressant, anti-anxiety, concerta, because for ADHD, 10 types of medication. Nobody should be on 10 types of medication. Then you know there's a major problem. Okay. And then additionally, burnout can cause conflict at home, relationships to break down, interpersonal conflict, and in extreme cases, domestic violence like abuse, hitting, getting hurt, not just physically, but emotionally and verbally as well, gender-based violence, and possibly even in extreme cases, people can commit homicide within their family. So you can see we need to get a handle on this before it gets to a place where we cannot contain it. Okay, so I know you guys are getting a bit tired, and I'm going to give you a little break now. So I just want to quickly go through this. It says how to prevent it. Know your limits. We spoke about that, and to know how to say no. Also having me time, making sure you exercise regularly, you eat properly, a good meal, a nutritional meal. Do you know that people can have full stomachs, but still suffer from malnutrition because of the poor nutrition they get from takeaways or quick meals, TV meals, and things like that. Look out for symptoms that act as red flags to signal us that we are approaching burnout, like your fatigue, your irritation, your inability to concentrate, lack of motivation if you're procrastinating, being overly emotional, which maybe you're not normally like that, and having unusual sugar cravings. Okay, that's an indication your body's tired and it needs energy. So it starts to crave sugar to try and help you get that energy. Also decide what work success looks like to you. So how much time do you want to give to your work or to your relationships? And don't forget about the time you've got to give to yourself as well. And also you must aim balance to work and family obligations. So if you know you're going to go to a family, your family are going to get together and you're going to be doing something, or your community or whatever, make sure that you plan ahead on how you're going to be able to have some time to recharge your batteries, time to do your work, and then you can still go and do those family obligations. And in the day, take regular breaks, like reward yourself for working hard. So say I'm going to work for 40 minutes and then I'm going to give myself a 15-minute break. And in that 15 minutes, I'm going to do whatever I'm wanting to do, that I'm allowed to do, so that I can recharge my batteries. Okay, don't phone a friend and chat, and then drain your battery that, unless talking to a friend recharges your batteries, but also respect their time as well. And then take in holiday time, try and do things that are going to recharge your batteries. I love going for walks in the mountain, and I love visiting. We've got a lot of wine farms out this way where you can go in for lunch, and just the energy of the place is really lovely. So you may have those places there in your country, like places where you enjoy going to, where you can just feel like, oh wow, just being in this environment makes me feel charged up again. So go find those places and go there. Also set up healthy boundaries. So understand, try and find a way to say no without being rude. Okay, and find a way to help yourself to feel emotionally and physically safe, and then also happy and psychologically healthy. So we need to know where that line is, where we can feel happy and healthy, and not feel burnt out and depleted. And also communicate your boundaries to your family and friends so that they understand your attempt to create balance in your life. So tell them, mom, dad, sister, whoever will listen, I'm really feeling exhausted, and I need to be able to find a way to charge my battery up. And can you help me? Can you help me to remind me that I need to take regular breaks, something like that? Whatever you need. We can also talk about that in the question and answer session. Okay, so any questions before we go for a little break? Anything you want to say? You don't, maybe it's not a question, but something you want to say.
Yes, we have a group of students. Anyone would like to put in a question?
How's it going so far?
It's wonderful.
Are you coping with what I'm saying? Are you all okay so far? You can give me a thumbs up if you're okay.
Okay. Dear students, have you all understood? Show a thumbs up. Yes, good.
Hello, ma'am. I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
Question is, what is an example of burnout?
Can you give an example of burnout?
Yeah.
Can anybody help him as to give an example of burnout? What, maybe something that's happened in your own life where you felt burnt out? Can anybody give an example?
Yes, ma'am, I want to answer the question.
Okay, go for it.
Ma'am, feeling exhausted.
Have you got a question, or you want to answer the question, Priyansha?
Ma'am, I am answering the question.
Okay, go for it. Answer it.
Feeling exhausted.
Feeling exhausted. Can you think of a time that you felt like that? Felt exhausted?
Yes, sometimes.
Amber, have you felt like that? Is it Amber that asked the question? Amber.
Yeah.
He's not listening to me now. Okay.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm having one question.
Okay. Hi there.
As you said that if we go through burnout, we should share that with our elders. So what if they don't understand our feelings?
Yeah, that's a very difficult one, because you've got to also think about who is safe enough to talk to your feeling, to speak to your feelings. It's no good speaking to somebody with their feelings and then they go and tell everybody else how you're feeling. So you've got to find somebody, maybe, I don't know if you've got counselors in your school. Do you ever have that in your school? Do
Yes,
they have
ma'am.
counselors? Okay, so that's a good place to go and talk to. A lot of people don't want to talk to the counselor because they're so scared of going there, but it's the best place to go. I was a counselor at the university, and people used to come and talk to me and ask me how can I cope with the stress that they're under, and then we would give them techniques to help them to cope with that stress. So maybe go and speak to your counselor. Maybe you've got a parent that is a very compassionate parent that you can speak to, because you also don't want to go to somebody who wants to shame you when you share your vulnerability. You want to have somebody that can empathize with you and say, sure, that sounds like it's really hard at the moment. Like maybe we can find a way to support you and things like that. Don, does that make sense to you?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Do
Any
you
more
have
questions?
a counselor at your school, Don?
Yes, ma'am. She helps a lot. Our teachers are also supportive here.
Oh, great. Is she somebody that you could talk to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fantastic. Awesome. Any other questions or any other things you want to say?
Yes, ma'am. Hello.
Yes. Hi. Hi, Krisha.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello,
I have a
ma'am.
question.
Ma'am, my question is that our society says that boys are strong. So why do boys also suffer with burnout?
That is such a good question that you're you saying now. That's a great question. I love that question. You see, that is the problem at the end of the day, is that there is this belief that boys must be strong. They can't have emotions. They can't feel weak. They can't feel vulnerable. They can't feel like they're not coping. So boys put on this mask, the Superman mask, I can do it all. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Think about how many times when boys cry, they don't like to show, they feel embarrassed that they're crying because they feel like they should be shame. It's shame. Why are you crying? You weak man. And it's terrible that people say that. Boys have got feelings just like girls do. So we should, this is your era now, okay? My era, old school. We used to be like, oh, everybody must be tough out there and we've got to not show our feelings. But this era, you guys can change that. You guys can say, no, boys have also got feelings. They also get vulnerable. They also try hard. I mean, they put so much pressure on themselves because they've got to be the man of the house and they've got to provide for their family one day and they've got to make their parents proud and all of that. But what happens if you feel like, jeepers, that's a lot of pressure. I don't know if I can do all those things. And so you kill yourself trying to do those things. And then you start to feel exhausted and you feel burnt out and you feel shame because you burnt out and you should be getting it wrong. You should be getting it right because this older brother or this uncle or this one or that one, he does it so much better. But they sometimes just get better at hiding it. And that's what often happens is people hide it and then they end up in hospital because they've had a heart attack or a stroke or they die at 50, and then you'll be like, it's so weird that this person died at 50 years old or something like that. But it's because they've just been putting this mask, the Superman mask on the whole time. And then their bodies, like, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's an excellent book because it tells you that your body will hold on to all the stress and everything that you are doing it. Your body holds on to that. And that's when you start to get symptoms later on. Women go into menopause early because their cortisol levels, which is the stress hormones, are so high all the time. And then they go into menopause early. Men end up getting heart attacks and strokes. My husband had a stroke at 55 years old because he was burnt out and didn't listen to his body that he was burnt out. 55, that's so young. And he's a fit guy. He wasn't fat, he was thin, he didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he didn't do excess, he wasn't diabetic, in nothing. There were no symptoms. And then out of the blue, boom, he had a stroke. Luckily, he's been able to recover, but other people are not always that lucky. and they end up like suffering for the rest of their life. So please, will you change that narrative going forward, that story? Boys can also suffer from burnout. Thank you for that. That's input. That was a
next
great
student. Anyone else? Anyone
Yes,
else?
ma'am, I wanted to
I
ask
have
my
a-
question.
Ma'am, I have
Fine.
a question.
Yes, ma'am, my question was that what is caused by the impact burnout?
What is caused by
Burnout.
Impact
the burnout?
Impact burnout.
What is caused by the burnout? Well, that was that one slide that I put on. Like when we don't know our limits, when we try too hard, when our goals, the work that we're doing, when it outweighs all the resources that we have to cope with. So all the things that we do to try and cope with stress, they don't work because we're not doing them enough. So often the burnout is there because we're just working and working and working and working and working and working and working, and all the stress around us. Our friends are having problems, our families are having problems, and we're living in a high stress environment all the time. There's no time to just take time out and go, woosah. Let me just breathe. Let me just center myself again. So it's about taking that time to recharge your battery. Somebody else had a question.
Yes, Sunita had a question from Chris.
Firstly, a very good afternoon, ma'am, to you, ma'am. And hearing you speak about burnout, I had this question. Is burnout primarily linked to work or occupational related factors, or the result of an individual level problems?
You see, I think it's all relative, whatever age you are. So yes, you will find it in work and occupation later on, but I think you guys are experiencing it at school as well. It just doesn't seem like you should be allowed to do it. You feel like, oh no, I shouldn't be allowed to do it. I'm a child. I should be coping with life and all of that. So parents are like, what? You're a child, man. What are you talking about? You're burnt out, man. Don't talk nonsense to me. And it's not true. Children suffer from burnout too. A lot of them from very young age suffer from burnout. So it's very important to know that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay,
great.
Just give me a minute, my dear children. We have one question on YouTube from Kirtana Sundaram. She's from Chennai. She actually wrote after seeing our e-flyer on the website at around 12:30 in the noon. She says 2 years back, she suffered with some health issues which piled up, and she started becoming exhausted, and her exhaustion only kept on increasing day by day. She felt pointless to live, and the problem is still going on. So Michelle, she wants an answer to her question, that or a solution, if you can give, that how to recover from this uh, and receive gratitude, because she said that I am mentally so upset, so disturbed, that everything which I hear, it's all negative, sarcastic.
Yeah,
she's not getting
absolutely.
anything which is coming to her in a positive note. So we want a small answer from your end and a solution.
I would really encourage you to go and speak to a counselor that you maybe have in your community or in your school, because it could be from so many different places that you're feeling like this. You know, it could be conflict in your home. It could be that your work stress at where you are at school is too much. It just could be that maybe you are a child in the family that feels like maybe one of your parents, you know, like we've seen now coming through COVID, there's a lot of long haul COVID that happens. So you might find one of the parents are very sick, and so the children now become the caretakers of their family and of their parents, and they try to make up for the parents not being able to cope in there, and which is lovely. But over a long period of time, you're going to get what we call adrenal fatigue syndrome. Okay, which is basically where your adrenals burn out and you start to get all these symptoms. That's like when your adrenals are burnt out, it takes a long time your body needs a lot of nurturing to try and get better. and sometimes it never gets better. So we want to stop it from getting there. We want to like see the red flags, and we want to be proactive about how we deal with it. So where you are at the moment, I would say the first thing to do is go and look at YouTube videos on on burnout and how to recover from burnout. Just keep watching them and go and speak to somebody that you trust, that can maybe try and unburden you of all the psychological things that you're holding inside of you that maybe is causing. Remember the iceberg. We want to understand what's going on below the water, what's underneath there that we're carrying. And sometimes just talking about that and letting it loose, letting it go, it will also help. And I'll start to talk after the break. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we can do to help you with that. Okay.
Is hallucination is also part of burnout?
No, hallucination is a more part of a more serious disorder called schizophrenia. So if hallucinations are happening, then you really need to go to a psychiatrist and a psychologist for help. That's very, very serious. And hallucinations can actually come from drugs as well, smoking weed and things like that. You can get drug-induced hallucination. So it's called drug-induced schizophrenia or drug-induced psychosis. So if somebody's suffering from hallucinations, that is something very serious, and you need to get the necessary help there.
Because when we have that scare of our job, so that time, the thinking changed. You have a job burnout. Then there are moments where you cannot do anything and you have a nervous breakdown. So all these things are basically very harmful, wherein we know that depression and burnout has two different roles to play.
Absolutely.
So this is one thing which we need the audience and the people who are hearing to us to know, that depression has a different role as well, and burnout has a very different role. And I would like, before we end this session, you should highlight all about the difference between the depression and the burnout in the next session, ma'am.
And so that's what I was saying to you earlier, is that I was saying to the audience earlier, is that that's what is so confusing about burnout, is because the symptoms often look like depression. And in fact, they can run together. You can have burnout and you can have depression and anxiety running together. So they're not always separate. They can also coexist together. So it gets confusing, because then people will go to the doctor and the doctor will give them an antidepressant to cope with the depression, but there's no talking, there's no learning skills, there's no ways of working through what is causing the stress in the first place. And so the pill, the tablet, just acts as a plaster and it puts it over the symptoms, but it doesn't help anything. The infection, the problems are still going to continue. And that's where it starts to come out in our health. Our health starts to deteriorate after that.
Are we ready to take 4 more hands have been raised, or we'll have it in the next hour? There are these 4 more hands have raised, starting from Isha. She also has a question. Arpita, and Ashwati, as well as Meenakshi. So how many more questions would you take before the demonstration?
So whatever you need. I would rather,
now
that everyone's participating so nicely, I'm here. So whatever we need. Okay, Isha.
So we'll have 2. Yes, you can call out the name. Isha, you start.
Yes, good evening, ma'am. You talked about how we often mistake the symptoms of burnout for depression. So can we say burnout is a mental illness?
No, not at all. Burnout is it's very much about your physical capabilities, what your body can physically cope with. And when it's depleted, then you have a physical reaction, which is burnout. Depression is I hate to say it's a mental illness, because depression can sometimes be a natural reaction to stress. So You may feel depressed because I'm not getting things right. I keep failing at my goals. Every time I try to show up in the way that I want to show up in my mind, I can't reach that standard, and then I feel like a failure. So over a long period of time, I may have different reasons that I start to feel depressed. And then that is a psychological thing. It's not a physical thing. It can be a chemical imbalance in the brain, but it's more likely a reaction to constant stress that you've had in your life. So they're almost like, how can I say this? If I say, if you hurt your leg really bad and I have to amputate it, does that mean every time I hurt my leg, I have to amputate it? No, that's not necessarily so. Only in extreme cases do I have to amputate my leg. So I have to look at it. What kind of hurt is in the leg? Is maybe this like a problem? Oh, looks like we might have to amputate, but if we fix it like this and we do this, then we can save the leg. That's the same thing with burnout and depression. Just because I'm tired doesn't mean I'm always going to be burnt out, because maybe I'm watching too much TV at night, or I'm on my cell phone talking to my friends at night, or whatever. So there might be other reasons why I'm tired. So we've got to look at why we are having those symptoms. We can't just go, oh, you're tired, you're suffering from burnout. It doesn't work like that. So you've got to look at multiple symptoms and how they are coming together, and if it makes sense that you're suffering from burnout. And then if you're feeling depressed, it may be because, why are you feeling depressed? Well, my mom and dad are fighting at home all the time, and it's just, it gets like hard for me to listen to that sometimes, and I'm starting to feel depressed because of that. So that's different, because that's not burnout. That's about a circumstance that is happening that is causing you to become depressed. So they can live together. The stress at home can be causing you, contributing to you feeling burnt out, but your parents fighting can be making you feel depressed because maybe they're going to get divorced or something. And then you have to, that's normal for you to feel depressed about that. I mean, imagine if you felt happy about that. Yay, they're going to get divorced. And then I'll be like, wow, you're having a break. We call it a psychotic break. Or you're having a psychotic break. And so, we've got to think about what is normal. What is a normal reaction to what you're going through in this life? And I don't think we do that enough. Because the first thing we sing, oh, you're depressed, on a tablet, kill the depression. Oh, you're anxious, kill the anxiety and the depression are there to tell you something is wrong in your body. And we've got to look at what's under that iceberg and see what's there. Does that answer your question, Isha?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to ask that how can a person who works to feed his family take rest from his work? So he can't afford to take rest, and even he's even more physically exhausted than other person. So how can he?
Yeah, in psychology, we call that an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. So they think that the whole world is only responsible to them. And so, yes, you do get people that are very, and they're good people. They just want to help everybody. It's not like they're bad people or anything. So they think the answer is, I've got to keep going. I've got to keep going. And that's not wise, because think about it. If I got a new car and I just drove that car around and I put the accelerator flat the whole time, and I just, how long do you think that car will last before that car just burns out? I burn out the engine. And then what's going to happen to the car? I can't drive it. So it's going to make no sense to me to then I must rather go, okay, I need to park the car for a bit, let the car have a rest, and then I'll come back and I'll drive the car. And then the car will last me for 10, 20 years. But if I drive the car flat like that all the time, then it's not going to work. So even in those circumstances, it's so hard to teach people who are like that it's okay to take breaks, because they actually feel shame because they can't do it all. It's the superhero complex. They want to do everything. They want to be everything. They want to save the world, but they need to put when you're in an airplane, maybe some of you haven't been in one yet, but if you're in an airplane, the first thing they tell you is if the airplane's going down, oxygen is going to drop from the ceiling. Okay, don't help your friend first. Put the oxygen mask on yourself and then help other people. And the reason is, if you don't do that and you're busy helping other people, you're going to pass out and then you're no good to anyone. So you first take time to put the oxygen mask on yourself and then you help the people around you. So will you tell that person that, please, Peter? Do you know someone like that?
Yes, ma'am.
Now you must go educate that person, will you?
Yes, ma'am.
So Michelle says you must take some breaks and take time to smell the roses, take time to smell the flowers and recharge your batteries. And it's okay to do that.
Yes, ma'am, definitely. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Who's next? Is it Don next? Don, you've had a chance. Let's go with Priyansha. You had a chance as well. Who hasn't had a chance? Swapnil, you haven't had a chance. I'll come back to you guys now. Don't go away. I'll come back to you.
I'm having one question.
Okay.
Me personally is going through mental issues for many days and my exams are knocking at the door. So how can I concentrate on my studies? Can you give me some tips?
That's our next one on about procrastination. Mental studies. If I must give you some tips on that, I would say to you, take regular breaks and look at your goals, like what you want to achieve today. Because sometimes we want to climb Mount Everest in like one quick step. We understand Mount Everest has help. We've got Sherpas and they come and help carry our bags, and we can only go from here to there, then we go from here to there. And it's a marathon. It's not a race. It's not a sprint. So you've got to make plans, find ways that also help you with your creativity. Maybe you're very artistic, so you can make mind maps out of your work, and then it's interesting. You sparks your interest. So you got to find the way that you study, and you can go look at YouTube videos. You can go look at study methods on YouTube videos and things like that. And that will also help you to find different ways to overcome procrastination. But take your regular breaks is also going to give yourself a reward. Like if you study for the whole day, I'm going to give you regular breaks. Then at the end of the day, I'm going to give you a chocolate or whatever. You're going to reward yourself. I'm going to go and do this thing that I really love doing. So find ways to make your studies interesting. And secondly, to reward yourself for good efforts when you do succeed. And don't punish yourself. Be positive about yourself. If you had a bad day studying today, don't go say, oh, you failure, you horrible person, you're always going to fail for the rest of your life. Don't say that to yourself. Say, you had a bad day. Tomorrow, you're going to be better. It's okay. You're going to be better tomorrow. Okay.
Yes, ma'am, that was
Thank you very much, Michelle. I think
Okay.
we'll just put up these questions for the second session because
Okay.
instead of 1, 2, now it is going to third question from the candidates. Because
think
you just sparked something
Swapnil
and
didn't
now
have
they're
a
coming
question.
out.
Swapnil
We
didn't have
can
a
just
question.
say, this will be the last question in the first session. Sapnil.
Okay.
Can we completely trust on our friends to overcome with burnout?
Just say that again for me. I didn't hear you.
Can we completely
So again, it's mute.
Sorry, it's breaking up. Do you know what he said, Dr. Mayuri?
So he's trying again, ma'am. Yeah, Sapnil
Okay.
say.
Yes, ma'am. Can we completely trust on our friends to overcome with burnout?
Can you help friends?
Your friend. Help or trust?
No, I'm trust.
Sorry, this line, your line is really bad. I can't seem to make out what you're saying. Do you want to type it there for me?
Can we, ma'am, his question is, can we trust? Can we trust our friends for taking care about burnouts? But I think it's trust or help.
So, you know, that's a very good question, because sometimes we expect our friends to be our counselors. And that's why you've got school counselors and you've got friends. I have a lot of the youth that come to me and they say, I'm trying to be there for my friends, but I'm so exhausted from trying to be there for everybody. And it's not fair on your friends to have the expectation that they're going to be your counselor. So my feeling is, if you are sick and you're going to go to, who would you go to if you were sick? Where would be the proper place to go? I've really got a bad cough and a fever and everything. Where would you go?
Please answer.
I trust.
Maybe to the doctor. Okay, but you probably go, if you're feeling sick, you probably go to the doctor. You maybe go to a hospital, that sort of thing. Okay. That's why the reason you do that is because the doctor has trained, he's studied, and he's trained to deal with this kind of sickness. But your friends haven't trained. And so if you're coughing and you're sick and that, you're not going to go to your friend and go, you know, I'm very, very sick. How can I get better? Because your friends have never trained to do that. So you've got to make sure that you go to the professional who's able to cope with what you're doing, because otherwise they may feel like I'm giving you advice and then just now you take the advice and then the advice didn't work out. A counselor never gives advice. They help you to come up with the solutions for yourself, but they never give you advice themselves. Okay. So I would say to you, counselors are there for a good reason. So go and speak to your counselor if you are having trouble. Don't worry about, oh, she's in the school and people are going to see me. It takes a bold person to say, I need help. I need help. I'm not coping. I'm going to go ask this professional for help and they're going to help me. Because who knows, maybe whatever you learn there, you can pass on to your friend at some stage. So that's also going to be helpful. Okay.
And I will be adding a line here, ma'am, that they should understand that burnout is actually a syndrome conceptualizing as a result from chronic workplace disorder. There is no medicine. There are other methods and ways to come out of this particular problem. So remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because so many people want medicine to fix the problem. They don't want to do the hard work to take time out. It's like, oh, I don't have time to take a break. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Because let me tell you something. You can carry on working like a hamster on a wheel like this, running around and around and around. Or you can just say, you know what? I don't need to be a hamster on the wheel. I can just get off for a bit, recharge my batteries, and I can actually work more effectively. Because how many of you sit there and you look at your book 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 and nothing goes into your head? But if you take a break, you come back with a fresh brain and everything's good. Oh, wow. Oh, yes, this is good. Now I'm taking things into my brain. So you must remember that you can keep going and feel fatigued and you will operate on half an engine, like your car is backfiring. It's driving like this. It's not going to get very far. Whereas if you just take the time out to take the car for a service and fix it up nicely, then you get back in the car and you'll be able to go off again at a nice speed. Okay.
Actually, because, you know, when we talk about burnout, as far as like people like us, I talk about myself as a psychologist and I'm a new person in this field. We had always studied that it is related to job and workplace. And then, you know, there are three main characteristics about this burnout, which we have actually studied. I want ma'am to help me out, that we actually have this feeling of energy depletion actually. That is happening in schools now. Why we have invited students today in your session, ma'am, is that the same thing is happening in school. the students are losing their energy. They are not having that kind of a feeling of studying properly, sincerely, with concentration. So, if we say that we are talking about burnout, people may come up with the idea by saying, what will burnout do here with the students? But basically, as an educationist, we have come up with this particular topic in this forum is all because we have found the same kind of characteristics now among the students, and they are finding it very difficult to cope up. It's not a mental, you can say, illness, but mentally it is distancing them from their studies. The basic, you can say, the basic things which they have thought about, they are distancing themselves, they are avoiding. Even if being a good student, if they're missing answering an answer, they think that, well, life is finished, life is over. So that is why we have come up that it's not related to only job, it is now related with each and every person who are living and enjoying life. So when you
and
start
even the teachers are
yes,
suffering from it.
correct. Yes, when you started with that me time, enjoying with the pet, that is your family members, 4 POWs family members, 3 of them. I too also have three of them, 4 POWs family members, and that's
So
where
you
I
know.
also, yes, I really, and I would like to share with this forum that one of the dog, his name is Spark, he cannot actually hear.
Oh wow!
Believe me, that his twin brother has taught him, and with the with by touching his body, like they explained what he has to do next. So it is another thing is that how we nurture ourselves in the circumstances and surrounding. So, my dear children, those who all are hearing in today's session, you become brand ambassadors to convey a message to your friends that probably burnout is related to job, but right now we are bringing this particular topic into the schools to explain to students that you're getting exhausted by reading and reading. Give a break, like ma'am said, with after every 2 hours or 2.5 hours, give a 10 minutes break, 5 minutes break. Like she said, before doing my session, I'll give you a break, and we started this Q&A session. So over to ma'am now.
Okay, are we allowed to take a 5-minute break for the students?
Yes.
Are they allowed to go and have a comfort break? You're on mute, ma'am. You're on mute. Sorry.
So that we are going to have an online coffee break. If you want, you can enjoy a cup of coffee, milk, tea, whatever you so desire, and we'll give a small break to ma'am also.
We come back in 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.